Hey guys, it is October 21st, 9:20 a.m., and we're going to start the day by updating our weekly tracker. I like to once a week write down what I did throughout the week, help me feel a little bit more rewarded, as well as to remember my progress, and then we'll get back to coding. Also, I got an email today, and it was by a fellow developer or someone that was looking to start a mobile app. And so I'm pretty excited that I get to help somebody out today. So I'm probably going to respond to that email as well.
So I wanted to talk to you guys about the context of this email. There were lots of great questions that were asked by this developer, and I thought that it would be great to share the information. I also asked the developer if it was okay to share this email as well as the contents of it, so it's all squared away and should be okay. So one of the first questions that I got was, how did I choose Android? And that was the beautiful part. I told them that I didn't. I'm using Flutter, which is a framework that allows me to develop an app for multiple platforms. So in short, it allows me to make code once, and it'll be available for both iOS and Android, as well as other platforms like Windows and desktops. Technically, Windows is a desktop, but Linux, Mac. This specific developer also wanted to code specifically for Android devices, and I totally understand the sentiment behind it and how it's important to appeal to your demographic. The thing is that you never really know what your true demographic is until your product is in the wild, and you can really get a grasp of the types of people that use your product as well as the devices that are used for your product. And this is super important across the board. It's why a lot of different companies and a lot of different app developers and lots of different coders in general try to make their code as inclusive as they can for as many platforms as they can, because you never really know what your demographic is going to look like. That's the bottom line. The next question that I got was, how do I use Android Studio? I told the developer that I actually don't use Android Studio and that I use VS Code, but to be honest, the IDE that we end up using doesn't really matter. A lot of IDEs will look scary with all of their different functionality and configurations, and it really becomes less scary as we start to increase exposure to the specific software. So for anyone who's starting out with a new IDE and doesn't know where everything is, my advice for that is to just start with bits and pieces, and eventually you'll be familiar. The first thing obviously is to start with where the run button is, and then after that you can branch out, maybe click the little chevron arrow that is brought up next to the play button. Usually it's associated with debugging, and then you can make your way to the navigation bar and click file and edit, etc. My top piece of advice for this developer was to not be scared of exploring all the different menu options. Try to find where your functionality would be, and if you don't have that functionality or you don't know where it is, then try giving it a Google search. Most IDEs try to cover a wide range of different types of debugging tools and developer tools to help make the process a lot easier. So 9 times out of 10, it's just that the option or the configuration is tucked away somewhere that isn't as intuitive or obvious. The next question I got was, which is better, Android Studio or Visual Studio Code? And to that, I say it doesn't really matter. I prefer VS Code because sometimes I code in multiple different languages. Android Studio is great for anything with Android development, and as far as I know, is really good for things specifically tailored to that, like coding in Kotlin. But at the end of the day, it really just depends on the developer. But yeah, that's pretty much all the questions that I answered in this email. I had a lot of fun answering it and being able to help somebody out. And honestly, this is just part of my way of giving back to the community, because I came from the open source world, and lots of developers, lots of people ended up helping me, answering my questions, and helping me debug. And I want to continue that tradition and that culture in the community to help other developers out. In terms of the actual coding in this session, I worked on quite a few things. I continued working on the modal sheet that had to do with each day on the schedule list, and I also started working on the UI mocks for the next page or the next piece of UI that I'm going to be working on, which is the blocking apps list. In regards to the modal sheet, there was a little bit of weirdness happening between the animation that was happening between the bottom navigation bar showing and hiding when a modal sheet gets pulled up. And I didn't really like that, so I tried to optimize it. I felt like if I was getting latency and lag on this animation when I was on a desktop, that without a doubt I was going to feel that lag on an actual device. And so I felt it was important to fix it. I'm still trying to figure out how exactly scaffolds work and how bottom navigation bars are used, but it seemed oddly difficult to hide the navigation bar and use the modal sheet instead. Eventually, I used a widget called an animated container, which has its own default animation. I also tried using other widgets like animated opacity or animated slider, and these just didn't work out. It caused a bunch of UI bugs, and I'm not exactly sure why animated container works, but the animation's nice enough to make the UI more fluid and it helps things look less jagged. Now the next part, as for the second part of what I was working on, the UI mocks for the blocking app list, I continue to have issues since the last time that I tried to tackle the design, just because I wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to represent certain things. Since then, I have been trying to learn more about the modern style of app designs, and it's been going pretty well, but I definitely have a way to go. So overall, with these two specific topics or tasks, I would probably give myself like an 8 out of 10. The coding itself went pretty well. The design had some progress, but definitely needs a little bit more work. And the reason why it's not a 10 out of 10, why I deducted 2 points, was because I really wanted to close out this schedule list page, but I ended up coming across this issue that bothered me, which had to do with the snack bar or the notification messages. And the issue was that if you pressed the button multiple times, or if you came across logic and triggered it that showed a notification message multiple times, then it would just queue up all the messages, and the messages would just keep on spamming until the entire queue was used, or until all the messages were sent. And so I spent some time trying to figure out how to clear the notification message queue, and I figured it out pretty quickly. You can just use a clear function when using snack bars, but the problem was that I was clearing it in the wrong area of my code, and it wasn't working because I needed to put it in 2 places. I thought about how this took an extra 30 minutes to an hour, and if I should have modularized this small piece of code, but since it was only adding 1 extra line, I felt like it wasn't necessary, and it was just hindsight that I wasn't really paying attention to the specific piece of code that I needed to change. I think my rule of thumb is that if you are changing more than 3 lines in 2 different places or more, then it should probably be modularized, because you're going to be reusing that code. If you change one thing, then you might have to refactor other parts as well, and it's just going to be a mess and lead to lots of bugs. If there's anything less than that, sure, there's a chance that you can get bugs by not changing a certain place when you refactor, but the odds are pretty low, and modularizing does take a little bit of time, so I try to weight things that way. I've been working on the app for about 6 months now, or 8 months. And it's been a lot of fun so far. I've been learning so much about the Flutter framework. and just about app development in general. I think that I'm constantly improving as a engineer and a developer, and honestly, that's what psychs me up the most about this entire project. I'm getting something that could eventually be used by other people, and I'm also coincidentally doing some marketing for it already. What I wanted to ask from you guys was, what do you guys think about the color of my app so far? I wanted to go with a green, like a light green color, and have accent colors of brown. My idea was to kind of have it based around the idea of life, or like the tree of life, but I don't really know if that's necessarily a good style or if the colors match well together, and if these are the best colors for a minimalist design. So feel free to let me know your thoughts on how the UI mocks are going so far. But so far I like it. I like the colors, they feel pretty neutral and they feel pretty calming to me when I look at it, and that's the kind of feeling that I wanted to give to anybody that is using the app. It's just relaxing, it's meant to help you be productive, but it doesn't make you feel like you have to do anything, and you can leave the app whenever you want. This app is related to blocking apps that would stop people from being productive, and so the idea behind a lot of it is to make sure that we allow the users to stay in control of their data and their applications, and to really disable things that they choose to disable, rather than having the app make suggestions or hinting at them to do certain things, because in my opinion that would make people feel like they weren't being as productive as they could be. And I wanted to give an upward trajectory for somebody that's trying to be productive, rather than feeling like they could be more productive but they're not currently. I felt like this would be best because that's honestly how I would feel, and it was also part of the feedback that I got from other people. And yeah, but I ended with showing what I left off with in the UI mock. It's not exactly finished, but I left it at a place that felt like was good for me to continue the next day. And I keep telling myself that I'm not making as much progress as I could, and that I could finish the app relatively quick if I didn't have a full-time job. But I think that I'm going at a pretty good pace. I think that I'm going as fast as I can while maintaining my financial stability as well as my sanity. And so I'm just gonna keep trying to go at the pace that I'm going in, trying to hustle, but at the same time making sure that I take time to de-stress and making sure that I'm doing things in a healthy way, because there's no point in me reaching the end of this app if I'm going to be burnt out, or if I finish it and I don't want to work on it anymore. But yeah, that's my progress. Enjoy the rest of the time lapse, and I will see you guys in a little bit.
Hey guys, it is 4:23 p.m. and I just finished my 7-hour work stream, or work session, however you want to put it. But it was pretty much 7 hours of coding. Felt pretty good. I love spending my Saturdays like this just because there's no deadline, there's no pressure yet. This isn't a full-fledged company and I don't have any pressure to get work done, so I could just take my time enjoying the code and learning and having a good time. I finished the schedule page and finished up some nice touches. I wrote some notes down for things that I may want to do in the future while I'm polishing the app, but for now I'm going to move on to the blocking app part of my app. And this is the hardest part just because to reach into storage for two different types of devices, Android and iOS, there's a lot of complicated things. I may have to separate code to be platform specific, so we'll see how that goes. But for now, work on the UI mock, and then we'll worry about that later. If you like the content, then subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.